Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report. Dodgeball, shrinking government waste and fraud. Joining us now is someone that is working to do all of that in Congress, the Doge Subcommittee member and Texas Congressman, Michael Cloud. Congressman, good to have you back on the show, sir.
Well, thank you. Good to be with you once again.
You're doing a lot of work. You had a very meaningful hearing going on today about whether the government should and taxpayers should be subsidizing news media. Tell us a little bit of your takeaways of the first few weeks of Congress's Doge Subcommittee work.
Yeah, it's really awesome to be involved in this. You know, a lot of the questions that we've been asking for some time as an oversight committee, it's certainly nice to finally have an executive branch who's working with us to find the answers to these questions, to make sure we're returning a good investment to the taxpayer on their dollars. And of course, what's been uncovered just in the first couple months of the Trump presidency has been quite astounding to find some of the ridiculous, some of the outlandish, and frankly, some of the evil things that our taxpayer dollars have been going to. And it's left the American people, you know, for a while you'd hear the elite saying, oh, this is important. It's, you know, we don't like paying taxes, but this is really important work that we're doing for whatever reason. And we're finding out that that's certainly not been the case in the tune of billions and billions and billions of dollars. And so to finally have the technology tools that have been brought to the table and to be able to work with an executive branch that's working to get these answers instead of obfuscating has certainly been a tremendous blessing.
No doubt.
Congressman, you've advocated for dismantling the Department of Education, really suggesting that the move could redirect more funds directly into local classrooms. Can you elaborate on how eliminating the federal department would translate into increased resources at the local level? And then maybe what mechanisms could ensure that these funds are effectively utilized?
Sure. Well, you first start off with the principle that, you know, the people who have the greatest onus and ownership in educating their kids are the parents, the families, the communities, those people closest to the child. And to think that we, way far away from the Capitol, should be, you know, mandating these sort of things and directing this sort of policy is inerrant. And then certainly when you see that since we've really taken stock in this, the Department of Education since the 70s, the more money we've poured into it has really just created a layer of administration in education, has not led to better outcomes. Reading, math, science scores have stayed relatively flat. And when you look at how we're competing on the world stage, our students are falling behind compared to other countries. And so the major investment we've made from a federal perspective is not having the desired outcomes. And so every dollar that the federal government takes, every dollar we spend, we have to first take it from state, communities, from the people we are supposed to be serving, or from their kids and grandkids. And so that's exactly what's been happening. And wouldn't we be better to, instead of taking the money and then having them beg for it back, to just not take the money in the first place, let them keep that in their families and their communities, and let them be more effective at providing an education for our kids and for our grandkids.
I like that approach. Now, a recent poll shows that 68% of voters, including 85% of Republicans, do support redirecting Doge savings to bolster Social Security and Medicare. These trust funds, we know that they're set to go insolvent in a short 8 to 10 years unless something is done. So given your focus on fiscal responsibility, what specific reforms would you advocate for to really ensure that those programs remain solvent without increasing taxes?
Sure. Well, first of all, the thing, as you mentioned, we've got to point out, because, you know, anytime you hear any sort of conversation from the left, you'll hear, oh my gosh, they're working to dismantle, people are going to be left out on the streets, and all these sort of, the sky is falling talking points coming from the left. But the truth is if these are going to be sustained, then we've got to course correct. Right now, we're headed off a fiscal cliff as a nation, and certainly these programs are a part of that. And so we've got to course correct. And what we're finding, first of all, through Doge, is that there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse through it. The president, in his joint address, went through the millions of people who are on the rolls, over 120 years old, who are getting these. And then you compare that database with what's going on in, for example, the Small Business Association, and then you find out that that they're receiving grants and loans as well. So there's a lot that can be done just through being the due diligence that any sort of business or company would provide, and taking that to every agency of our federal government. And then you look at right now how states are incentivized, specifically, for example, in Medicaid, where the people that the program was designed for, getting 50, 60 cents reimbursement from the federal government for every dollar spent, but then single adult males who are able-bodied, could be, should be in the workplace, are incentivized at something like 90%, a much higher rate in some of these states. And then if you're an illegal alien, you're not supposed to be in the country, then you're reimbursed at 100% for some of these dollars. This is a backward perversion of what that program was designed for and built for. And so obviously that's the first place to start. But when you say, look, we're going to address the misuse of this, of course, from the left, you get all the Chicken Little stories and messaging from them. But this is about making sure, again, that we're turning good return on investment to the American taxpayer.
Congressman, you gave some of the great examples of small business loans that were going to 11-year-olds and under, extraordinary waste to people who've long been dead but still on the rolls, eligible for money. You've picked one that I think a lot of people didn't believe at first, but it is definitely true. We spent 20 years trying to keep the Taliban out of power in Afghanistan. In the last few years, we've given a lot of money, taxpayer money, to the Taliban. Tell us what you found.
Well, exactly. That came up in a hearing to where we find out that taxpayer dollars are going, if any other business had been funneling money to the Taliban, they would be in jail. But because it was going through the agencies in our federal bureaucracy, somehow that was okay. And to find out that the taxpayers are funding both sides of the equation of war they are very mad, very upset, and like, what in the world am I working this hard for if this is the stuff that our dollars are going to? The fact that we're funding our nation's enemies is egregious. It's treacherous. It's just immoral. And obviously, finally we're bringing light to this so we can address it.
Yeah, so important.
Congressman, you've been such a strong supporter of our Second Amendment, and Second Amendment advocates have really been urging DOJ to halt what they're calling gun control studies by health agencies like the CDC and the NIH. They're arguing overstep into policy areas beyond public health. So as a staunch defender of gun rights, how do you view DOJ's role in really reining in these agencies? What oversight measures would you push to ensure that those taxpayer funds aren't used for what some see as really politically motivated research?
Yeah, that's one of the huge ways that the federal government grows is from study, and they're presented on the floor usually through a suspension bill as these benign things, and so it's a study, it's a report, and that's usually the toe in the door, so to speak, to the greater programs, the greater control. Those studies are usually going to left-wing organizations who come up with the data that they want to find in order to advance the agenda that they want to advance. And so certainly we saw through COVID how this federal government under the Biden administration had well exceeded their authorities and emergency powers to do all kinds of nefarious activities against the American people, from taking away their choice in health care to running people out of their business. People were threatened to lose their law license, their medical license, all these things that would happen because they overused what was supposed to be emergency health authorities. And we even saw some governors at the state level begin to take those sort of authorities, and it was concerned, certainly at the federal branch, of using that to confiscate firearms among law-abiding citizens. And so this is a tremendous concern. Thankfully, we can trust this administration not to go that route, but it's important for us to use this window of opportunity with this administration to codify these things into law. We've introduced legislation actually to deal with the fact that many people are concerned about the federal government using a health emergency, for example, to confiscate firearms from lawful abiding citizens. And so we have legislation. It's gaining a lot of support here in Congress, and we're working to get that through this term.
You've been working tirelessly. I've seen this real quickly, sir. Got about 20 seconds left. What do you think the final number that Congress will achieve? What will those savings look like when we get through the summer?
Well, Elon's proposed that we could find $1 trillion in waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, corruption. That sounds like a lot, but we've just gotten into a couple agencies and we're finding hundreds of billions. And so you begin to look at that and you're like, wow, this may be real. And President Trump talked about $2 trillion as the goal to get us back to a balanced budget. And so I'm optimistic that we'll get close to that.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. Well, I know one thing, you are tirelessly working at this. We've seen you day in and day out on the DOGE subcommittee. It's a great honor to have you on the show, sir.
Oh, thank you. Honored to be here. God bless you.
Thank you so much.